Welcome, everyone, to the Recycle Right campaign's Ask Me Anything Recycling Edition event. This is our first event in our first week of the Recycle Right campaign. My name is Andrea Folsom. I am the communications coordinator at the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. We are joined today by a series of expert panelists that I will introduce in just a moment. But I wanted to start off today letting you all know a little bit more about the Recycle Right campaign, because this is our first event for it. So the Recycle Right campaign is a 4-month campaign, and it has 3 main goals. It's to encourage residents to recycle more, encourage residents to recycle better, and to create an evergreen Recycle Right campaign that can be used now and into the future. The whole purpose of this campaign is to share recycling, education, bust some myths, help people set up new recycling habits, and share some other great content that folks and communities can find helpful in educating their residents and supporting recycling within our communities. This is a grant-funded campaign, and we're supported by the USDA. So, stop sharing. So with us today, we have a great panel of experts. Thank you all for joining us. First up, we have Reagan Bissonnette, the Executive Director of the NRRA. And Reagan, if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Sure, yes, thanks, Andrea. So I'm Reagan Bissonnette, and for those of you who are not familiar with the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, welcome and thanks for joining us. We are a recycling nonprofit that has been helping communities manage their own recycling programs for over 40 years. And we now have over 450 members throughout New England, and the majority of those are municipalities, towns, and cities that we help manage their own recycling programs. So we are looking forward to talking with you all today to answer the many questions that have flooded in.
Great. Next up, we have Bonnie Bethune, who is she's our senior member services representative at NRA.
Hello, everyone. As Andrea mentioned, I am the member services rep here at NRRA and have been here for 19 plus years. And my prior experience is working as a recycling facility operator. I work in cooperative marketing and purchasing, but most of the time I really enjoy the technical assistance questions that come in almost hourly, it seems. And we're going to see some of those questions that I field on a daily basis today.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally up, we have Mark Morgan, who's the solid waste manager in the town of Lebanon.
I have to unmute. So I manage the solid waste facility for the city of Lebanon up here in the Upper Valley. This facility is owned and operated by the city and serves the disposal needs of 22 other communities. We do operate an active landfill here, but we do have a very aggressive recycling program and food scrap program here at our facility.
Great. So as you all know, when you signed up, we had an option for you to send in questions, and boy, did you ever. We received lots and lots of questions already, but we still do have the Q&A option. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see what looks like 2 little talk bubbles, and it says Q&A. If you click on that, you can send us a question, and we will do our best to get to it. We are planning on being as fast as we can to try to get through as many questions as we can today. If we don't hit something that you're interested in, you can always shoot us an email and we can see about answering your question. And a lot of these questions will also be answered on our Facebook page and Instagram throughout our Recycle Right campaign. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first question to Reagan, which is, what is recycling?
It's a good question to start with. So recycling is essentially a manufacturing process. Recycling is taking material that we no longer need or use and making sure that we're turning it into new products or packaging instead of sending it to a landfill or incinerator.
Great. So, in related to this question, another one we received a lot was, "What is recycling contamination?" Bonnie.
So recycling contamination is anything that obviously doesn't belong in that category when you go to your local transfer station. Aluminum cans, steel cans, food cans should not go in with aluminum cans because they're a very different material. So we really just advise that you talk to your operators, look at the facility signs, ask questions. If the facility operator doesn't know, they're going to contact us. If we don't know, we're going to go to our vendor and we're going to communicate all the way down the line.
Great. So, Mark, how can we make recycling easier?
This is a very complicated question, but I think it can be addressed simply at the local level by getting educated. The operator needs to understand market specifications, pass that on to the residents. The other part of this is consistency. Facilities that change their specifications as far as what can go in what bin and changing it too often creates confusion and frustration. So making it simple and consistent are two ways that we can make it a lot easier for the resident.
That's great. So, we're going to assume that all three of you also recycle. And so, on that note, what are some recycling hacks that you have? What are some tips or tricks that you use in your personal life to help you keep up your recycling habit? And we'll start back with Reagan again.
So two things. One, I make sure it's as easy as possible. So at home, I've got a recycling bin right next to my trash can in the kitchen. And then if I'm out and about and there's not recycling around, I'll often stash something in my bag and bring it back home, like a aluminum soda can.
Great. Bonnie, what do you think?
Um, Keeping the habit of using shopping bags, reusing shopping bags when you go back to the grocery store, but also adding in that film, your bread bags, your plastic bags, anything that stretches. Put that into those reusable shopping bags because there's typically at your grocery store, there's typically a bin to have that recycled that will be made into plastic lumber. So just creating the habit. Put those bags back in the car, put the film inside, ready to go.
That's great. And Mark, do you have any hacks that you use?
So believe it or not, there's still confusion in my own home about what is and is not recyclable. So it's going back to the question you asked me earlier. It's just making sure that you understand what is and isn't recyclable. Like Bonnie just mentioned, grocery bags. Recycling those. It's important to understand what's okay and what's not, and discontinuing things like wish cycling.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. So, we're hearing a lot about what we can do to make recycling more easy for us all. Bonnie, I'm interested in knowing what mistakes do people make when recycling that ends up in material not ending up recycled, even though it perhaps was tossed in the recycling bin?
If we look at one particular product, say cardboard boxes, now that means something different to everyone. We have a lot of them with Amazon right now, but cardboard boxes for marketing purposes is just corrugated cardboard. It has that little waffly layer. You wouldn't want to put cereal boxes in there. You wouldn't want to put dirty or wet cardboard in there. You want to produce a product. You want to help your recycling operators produce a very good, clean product. Because when they come to us to ship that material, we're going to take a picture of that product before the vendor will even buy it. And that'll get the best pricing.
Great. And Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that one as well?
So in line with what Bonnie is saying, one of the things that I find is the biggest mistake is putting something in that shouldn't have gone in there in the first place. And one item that sticks out in my mind is paper cups. Very often people will, well-intentioned, oh, this is a paper cup, I'm going to throw it in here. A little trick that I tell people is if it's a paper product that holds water, it's not recyclable. And that's just a little tip that I give people. And so well-intentioned, but it can really foul things up.
Great. So this campaign has been focused mainly on New Hampshire, although a lot of what we're talking about today is really applicable across the United States. But speaking specifically about New Hampshire, Reagan, what is the future of recycling in New Hampshire?
Well, that's a very big question. And what I will say is that actually there are a lot of conversations happening right now about the future of recycling and waste management in New Hampshire. So, for anyone who might not be aware, there is a solid waste working group that was established by the legislature. And that group meets monthly and is helping the Department of Environmental Services plan for New Hampshire's solid waste future. So, Mark and I actually both are members of that group. And tomorrow we'll be having the first meeting of some subcommittees, and there's actually a subcommittee dedicated to recycling and composting that will be meeting with the specific plan of making recommendations for updating the New Hampshire's solid waste plan.
That's great. So it's great to know that we have a path and a plan already in action. I guess on the flip side of that, Mark, what is the biggest challenge to recycling in New Hampshire right now?
I think the biggest challenge to New Hampshire is not just right now. It's been an issue really throughout the Northeast, and it's access to markets. And this is where the NRA was initially established, was to create a cooperative to bring loads together, marketable sizes. But that still remains to be the challenge, to have access, because very often people will come to us and say, well, this item's recyclable. And the answer to the question is, yes, it's recyclable, but we don't have a market quantity to get access to that market. So even if there is a recyclable product, we might not have the necessary quantities to get it to that market. So being in a rural Northeast, that's in my mind the biggest challenge.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. Another question we asked, I'm actually not going to send to any of you. It was, what are the most effective ways to communicate with the general public and get their fullest participation? So I will take this one because that is currently my job. We have found that the best way and most effective way to communicate is to make it simple, make it easy, and then repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. Recycling education is not a one and done situation. Really, in order to make sure that your general public, your community is hearing and understanding what is specific to your community when it comes to recycling, is to continually let them know about recycling. It seems really simple and really basic, but it's a really easily missed opportunity for a lot of towns. It might feel like you're saying the same thing over and over again, and you are, and that's okay. That's how more and more people are able to hear the message, internalize the message, and continue recycling. So we're going to move on now a little bit to the nitty gritty of recyclables. And I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball, but I'm still going to start with Bonnie. Bonnie, earlier you mentioned plastic lumber. Can you just describe briefly what that is?
Most of you are familiar with the Trex product, which is the plastic lumber for your porches and decks and so on. And it's a very viable company that literally Hannaford, when they have that bin of plastic film, that's where that material goes. It goes from the Hannaford sites to a distribution center, gets baled, gets processed through Trex. I mean, this is actually happening. It's been happening for a long time, and we're kind of not aware of it. So yeah, a product being made out of something that we use every day, that we really shouldn't be throwing away, but is not readily recyclable at our recycling facilities. So this is really the onus is on the individual to separate that material. Again, film, anything that stretches, that's the key, and clean, and yeah, made into Trex lumber.
Great. So those are like the picnic benches or other seats that you often see outside parks. So on another note, a more nitty gritty, Bonnie, plastic mayonnaise containers, are they recyclable?
They are recyclable. Certainly you want to clean them out, because everywhere down the line, recyclables are touched by people, even though we think it's all automated, and it will be more robotics as the future comes into play. But it used to be that any kind of oil, vegetable oil, mayonnaise, peanut butter, any food product with oil, that container was not acceptable. That has changed as technology has changed and the washing system has become much better. So yes, plastic mayonnaise jars can be recycled.
Excellent. So Reagan, another question we get asked a lot is, what about styrofoam? Is it recyclable? What do we do with it?
Well, like so many things, it is recyclable. The question is there a market near where you live to recycle that item? So in most of New Hampshire, you're going to be told by your community that you should just be throwing that material away. However, I will say that there is a pilot program that is going to get started in the town of Guilford, where they're actually going to be recycling styrofoam. So you can stay tuned for more information about that. I believe an article was just recently published about that new initiative that's happening in Guilford.
Excellent. Another question that came in for Bonnie is aluminum foil recyclable?
Absolutely. Aluminum foil, aluminum pie plates. Again, you want to keep them clean, and they don't go in with aluminum cans. They would go in with your steel or tin cans, or in with the scrap metal. So again, look at your local facility rules and regs, but yes.
Great. We're going to continue with you, Bonnie, for one more in the hot seat. Another big question is, what should we do with our number 5 plastic, especially if your recycling center doesn't take it? So these are things often yogurt containers are number 5 plastics.
Yeah. So number 5 is PP or polypropylene, and it is the next valuable plastics out of our recycling facilities after your milk jugs, Tide bottles, and soda bottles. So number 5, you can just put it in my garage. I know. We have 2 facilities right now that are separating out number 5s. Again, Mark mentioned it earlier. You've got to have a lot of quantity. When you start talking about a tractor trailer load out of your facility of just number 5 plastics, it's not going to happen for many, many years unless you're an incredibly large facility. But we do take number 5s with our 1 through 7 plastics program. And about a quarter of our members use the 1 through 7 plastics program. So we are in effect recycling number 5s. Again, what is your local facility doing? How is their reuse? Those containers are very handy. Perhaps reuse them, and encourage your town to start taking those materials, and check with NRA to see how you could do it.
That's great. So it sounds like there are a few options. The biggest one being ask your transfer station. Okay, so I have a couple here for Mark. We're going to start talking about plastic a little bit more. So are unmarked plastics, are they trash? Are they recyclable? What do we do with them?
So the number system with plastics has created an enormous amount of confusion. The number system actually just denotes the chemical makeup of the plastic. It doesn't actually indicate recyclability, although as we said earlier, technically everything's recyclable. We have noticed this change in plastics where it's either difficult to find the number or there's no number at all, that even the manufacturers are starting to abandon the number system because they're recognizing that it's meaningless. So for here in Lebanon, one of the things that we're starting to tell our residents is to stop looking at the number and look at shapes. So bottles, jars, tubs, and there's one more, I can't think of it, but it's the shape of the container that denotes recyclability. It's important to understand too that some of the unmarked plastics are not recyclable. So again, not to keep pushing everything off to your local facility, but having that information and that relationship with your local recycler is critical in helping understand what is and isn't recyclable.
That's great. So more specifically, Mark, what about rigid plastic? So either that Trex lumber that we were just talking about, or perhaps your outdoor plastic furniture from last year's just worn, and you want to recycle that. Can it be recycled, and what do you do with it?
again, most things are recyclable, and depending on the programs, there aren't many rigid plastic recycling programs around any longer. Again, talk with your local facility. Uh, Sometimes they start collecting it, but then the market dries up. So before you recycle that outdoor patio furniture and throw it in the recycling bin, please ask your operator, because 9 times out of 10, it's not recyclable. Neither is snow fence or a whole host of other items like garden hoses, um, kiddie pools, sleds are not typically recycled products.
Great, that's really helpful, especially as we're all spring cleaning. So Bonnie, another question we get often is what do we do with clamshell containers? It might say number one, but it's what you got your berries in, or maybe a sandwich in, and it's that light kind of clamshell plastic. What do we do with that? Is it trash? Do we recycle it?
Well, that depends. Different markets have different answers for that. The majority, they do not get reprocessed. They're called thermoforms. They have a different melting index, so they react very differently when they're pelletized and made into something else. One of our markets says absolutely no, we don't can't take any. Another market might say yes, we'll take them, but NRRA wants to be assured that that material is being reprocessed. So at this point in time, if you can avoid buying them, that's what I would do.
Great. Another thing with spring comes gardening and planting, and a lot of us, Reagan, get our plants in those black plastic containers. Why can't we recycle that very easily?
So when it comes to sort of plant pots and those types of things, I would always encourage people to check with their local gardening supply store to see if maybe their garden center wants to reuse those. When it comes to black plastic, whether it's in those black plastic pots or if you're talking about takeout plastic, um, sometimes that's not going to be easily recyclable because that material is going to go and be processed on a black conveyor belt. And the machinery might not be able to pick out that type of black plastic and distinguish it from the conveyor belt. And so, in a number of single stream recycling systems in particular, you'll see that they say they cannot accept black plastic, which you're often seeing with takeout containers.
Great. That's another great reminder that really recycling is a manufacturing process. So Bonnie, this we sort of touched on this a little bit already. When it comes to frozen food boxes or other boxes that we put in the freezer or in the refrigerator, are these recyclable? Do paper mills, are they problematic at paper mills at all?
Yep, Mark had alluded to the plastic, the cup, the fiber cup that has a coating on it. That's a plastic coating. Your milk jug used to have a wax coating, but that's a plastic coating now. So it's called wet strength. And it does not break down in the pulpers at the mills. This is the main contention. So of all the things that we purchase, a coated frozen pizza box, a coated cup, these are probably one of the few things that we will say are not recyclable because of that coating. Or another thing would be a waxed box, a cardboard box that had fruit in it. Again, does not break down in the mills. Very practical problem. So best to keep that material out of the mixed paper and out of the cardboard.
Great. And it's sometimes, you look at a cup and you think, oh, it must be paper. So it's just good to remind ourselves that if it's holding water and not seeping through, it probably has a coating on it and can't be recycled. On that same topic, and I don't know if you know this is a tricky one. Is there a way to tell the difference between a wax coated or a plastic coated pasteboard for food boxes, or do you just have to guess?
Both of them would be unacceptable. I mean, I haven't seen one. We used to, as kids, if you remember, we used to take our fingernail and run down and see wax. Most of it is plastic coated. That's, the lightweight, cheaper way to do this. So it's shiny. I guess you could go with shiny. And if it could be put in the freezer. Um, and another example is beer cartons, soda cartons. Same thing, they're not as shiny, but if they would have to be put in a refrigerator or freezer setting, it's most likely is a wet strength and is unacceptable with mixed paper or cardboard.
Great. Another hot question for Reagan is, what do we do with the lids? So we know we can recycle that plastic bottle or that glass bottle, but it has a lid. What do we do with it?
So the answer is ask your town transfer station staff, because it depends on the company that is acquiring those containers, and it depends on whether or not they want the lids or not. So for example, we have two programs for recycling glass through NRA. One is taking clean food and beverage glass containers and recycling them into new glass or fiberglass insulation. Our vendor in that case is happy for you to leave the lids on, because as part of their process, they are removing those lids and then recycling them. However, if you're going to have your glass go through what's called our process glass aggregate program, where it's being crushed into an aggregate and used in road and infrastructure projects, then we do not want to have caps on those glass jars. So it really does depend on what's ultimately happening with that material and where it's going. And so again, you want to check with your own town. And so some towns are going to give you a different answer.
Great. So Bonnie, earlier you mentioned cardboard and paper recycling, and you were talking about cereal boxes and said that cereal boxes should not go with cardboard recycling. Does that mean that they're not recyclable at all, or should they go someplace else?
So your cereal boxes, they actually have 7 layers inside of there of what they call cardboard, which is the very confusing thing between corrugated cardboard boxes and card stock or cardboard. But those should go in with your mixed paper, not with your cardboard. And that's sounds real general, but that is the spec.
Great. And then what about egg cartons? Do they go, the paper ones, do they go with paper, cardboard, trash?
Again, Mark would say, talk to your recycling facility and see what they say. But in general, they would go in with mixed paper because, again, they're not corrugated. And that is one of the biggest questions we have throughout the 40 years I've been in the industry. What do we do with egg cartons? Reuse them would be best.
Yeah, save them for your local chicken farmer.
Yep.
Excellent. So on the topic of delicious food, Mark, what do we do with the foil from candy wrappers or the top of yogurt containers? Should that be recycled?
So this is an interesting question for me because candy wrappers are not foil. It is a plastic. So lumping candy wrappers and yogurt top foils together is kind of tricky. So the candy wrappers, unless you're using like a TerraCycle program, are not recyclable, particularly in with aluminum foil. But the yogurt top containers, as Bonnie alluded to earlier with the aluminum foil question, with pie plates and things of that nature, can certainly be recycled. With, as they mentioned, with scrap metal. Although programs like here in Lebanon, we do put that in with our aluminum cans, which just further gives evidence to the need to talk with your local recycler, because each town does things slightly differently.
And I want to add, Mark, I think that there are some candies like chocolates that do have a true foil wrapper. And so in that case, if you accumulate enough of it, you could put that in with things like tin foil.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There are some, round candies or kind of artisan candies that certainly are in foil wrappers or are on the tops of wine bottles and things of that nature. So yeah, they could be recycled with the aluminum foils and pie plates.
Excellent. Bonnie, what about nail polish bottles? This is a real specific question. What do we do with those?
It is, but it's a good question. If you're going to be recycling glass jars and bottles, anything that has a painted coating on it could potentially be flammable in the processing of making fiberglass insulation, say. So again, what is your local program? Where does that material go? Um, so in general, I would say no, not recyclable.
Okay. Another real specific one, but it's been asked a couple of times are batteries. Are batteries, we've heard that you can just throw them in the trash. Is that dangerous? Can they be recycled? And this one's for Bonnie as well.
Household batteries have been also another question that has come up frequently. Part of everyone carries a cell phone. It has a lithium battery in it. You want to be very careful with those kinds of batteries. You want to make sure that you get them to your recycling facility and have them handle those properly. Alkaline batteries, which we have in our drawers at home and so on, can still retain a charge. And if you were going to throw them away with trash, which they no longer contain mercury, you'd want to take a piece of tape and run it right across both ends of it, and then you can throw it away safely. But if your recycling center does take them, then they would handle them in a different way. So handle batteries, especially household batteries, very, very carefully.
Yeah, and it sounds like especially those lithium batteries, anything in your phone or computer, you really don't want to be setting things on fire with those. So talk to your recyclers. Um, so this one's for Regan. This is an interesting question. We all receive mail, whether we like it or not, junk mail, regular mail, and sometimes we get things with a little, it looks like a plastic window in it. Do we have to rip that plastic window out of every envelope we recycle, or can it be tossed in there?
Thankfully, no, you do not have to rip that window out. In terms of the companies that are taking that and turning it into new products, they're used to receiving that material and they can remove it as part of their process.
Excellent. And then sort of going back to things with batteries, when it comes to electronics, and this one's for Mark, do we have to recycle the cord along with the electronics? What do we do with those cords?
So in many cases, for again to go back to this, the idea of simplifying your program, definitely putting cords in with your electronics is easier for the resident. There are some communities who do separate them out. So again, it's important for folks to understand how electronics are managed and received. And to go back a little bit to the question that Bonnie answered about batteries, and just to reemphasize the importance of proper handling of electronic devices. There are batteries in so many products nowadays, and very often those are improperly disposed of or improperly recycled. There have been fires at landfills and recycling centers because people think, well, this is recyclable. I'm going to put it in my recycling bin, and then it causes problems in the sorting facility. Or they don't know where it should go, so they discard it completely and improperly dispose of it in their trash. It can create some serious problems. But as far as electronics go, anything with a plug, many programs, that's their standard, and can easily be recycled. Very often the plugs are removed later by the staff, but plugs should certainly stay with your electronics.
Great. I'm throwing you all a curveball of a question that didn't come in earlier. I'm just seeing it now. So Earth Day is coming up tomorrow, and there are a lot of roadside cleanups. And one thing that many people find are dirty aluminum cans. So do these dirty aluminum cans need to be washed or rinsed before they're recycled? Should they be trashed, or are they okay to be thrown in the recycling hopper? Who would like to take this one? Looks like Bonnie's unmuted, so I'm going with her.
I'll take that one. Certainly, you wouldn't want to include a aluminum can full of dirt and so on and so forth, but shake it out. I think it would be okay. Just remember to wear gloves when you're doing curb cleanup on the roadsides.
Yes, no, I
And you're
agree.
most likely to see some batteries out there too, so be prepared for that.
And I also saw just a related question about, is it okay to recycle aluminum cans that have been crushed? And absolutely, yes.
Wonderful. So another interesting question, Bonnie, is about photos. I don't know how many people print off photos anymore, but I think there's still some. So if we have photos printed on photo paper, it's paper. Does that mean it can be recycled?
This is interesting because we get questions all the time that people will send us these kinds of questions. We send it to a couple of our tried and true vendors, and the question came back, no, if you've got a big bin of photos, we'd really rather see it out of the mixed paper, not included. If you have one or two, I don't think that's going to change the world. But if you had a great bunch of them, the best thing would be to dispose of those with the trash.
Excellent. And then a final kind of nitty gritty question for you, Reagan, is what is the best way to recycle fabric? So old clothes, really anything made out of fabric. What should we do with that?
Sure. So if you have items that are in good condition, then certainly it's great to make sure that they're going to get reused before they're recycled. You can take them to any number of places like Goodwill or Salvation Army. But there's also, I'm sure people have seen them all over, these boxes on the side of the road, or in a parking lot or at transfer stations, where you can place clothing and other fabric. And many of those will accept items that are torn or in disrepair, so long as they're clean and dry. And so that can be an option. A number of them, they'll even take, if you only have one of two pairs of shoe, they'll take the shoe. So that's always a good option to look for.
Great. All right. So changing a little bit, we're going to focus a little bit on the money side of recycling. So, Mark, one of the questions that came in is what would it take for my town to make money on recycling instead of paying more than the trash costs? And is recycling profitable?
When considering an answer to this question, I think it's important to understand your local program. Some programs are doing a zero sort or a single stream facility, and that's going to be difficult to turn around into a less than disposal cost. So the cost of processing zero sort or single stream recycling, there's a cost to that because it's another sort facility. As far as possibly getting those processing fees down, it may be worthwhile talking with your vendor and asking about contamination rates. Are you being charged a contamination fee? And cleaning up your recyclables may help, reducing your contamination may help with some of those processing fees. For those that are looking at a recycling program, source separated recycling programs typically do better financially. It's important to understand your markets, establish what you're going to do, make sure you've got the right equipment, and understand the specifications for those markets to maximize profitability. One element of source separated facilities that can at times be missed is the need for storage. You can collect it and process it, but if you're baling it and then it's stored outside, you're shipping milk jugs in the middle of the winter with ice in it, your milk jugs can be downgraded because snow and ice can be a contaminant at some mills. But if you don't have adequate storage, you're not going to benefit from market-ready trailer loads. The other piece of this too that I wonder is, as a municipality, how critical is it to be profitable? And something that's missed when figuring out the viability, not profitability, but viability of your recycling program is the fact that you're not paying for disposal fees. So this is a source separated facility, not a single stream facility with processing fees. But if you're comparing your source separated facility and comparing it with your disposal, make sure you're including avoided disposal fees when figuring out the value of your program. Because every ton you don't throw away, you didn't pay somebody else $75 to $120 a ton to get rid of. So it's important to understand that equation when considering the viability of your program. And it's the right thing to do. Landfills are filling up. As landfills continue to fill, the cost for disposal is not going down, it's going up. So every ton you're able to keep out of the landfill is is preserving future disposal capacity. So that has a value as well.
And I'll just add that, I mean, Mark is really getting at the heart of the mission of the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, which is to help communities recycle and manage their waste in a way that's both environmentally sustainable, but also financially sustainable. And it really is important to think about how to help communities manage their waste in a way that's going to support their local budgets. And so these are conversations we're having every day with communities.
And if we really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of the pricing very briefly, cardboard right now is worth $140 a ton. Think about a tractor trailer, 22 tons on there. That's quite a bit of revenue for a town. Aluminum cans are at $2,000 a ton right now. And if you add on that cost avoidance that Mark was referring to of your $85 to $100 to throw it away, you've really got a much more valuable product. Does it cost to get that recycling into that trailer? Absolutely. But again, avoiding landfill space use and producing new product. Win-win.
That's great. So Reagan, sort of on the same topic really, is this idea of whether or not recycling is environmentally sustainable. You know, we have to pay, and there's the environmental payment really of transporting and hauling recyclables. So does that mean that this is really something that's environmentally good?
Well, I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that whether you're recycling an item or whether you were disposing of it, there's going to be transportation involved. So, and I think sometimes people might sort of miss that piece of it. So, you know, if a community, if you throw something away, it's still going to have to either get on a truck and get taken to a landfill or taken to an incinerator. It still has to go to another point to be managed. So similarly with recycling, it needs to be taken somewhere. Ideally, we are looking to recycle items as close to home as possible. We work with companies right in New Hampshire. There's a paper mill that we send material to right in New Hampshire that's turning into new products. But we also have some material that's going further away. Also, I would point out that, you know, there's been a lot of studying on this, and the Environmental Protection Agency actually has an entire waste reduction model with extensive calculations where they look at the full life cycle of recycling and to what degree it's helping offset greenhouse gas emissions. And so we actually use that information every year. And last year, all the communities that our organization worked with helped recycle enough material to basically remove the equivalent of almost 22,000 cars, passenger cars from the road for an entire year. So it really, recycling really does have a beneficial impact.
That's fantastic.
Just to add to that, Andrea, whenever we have a tractor trailer load come into New England to pick up a load of cardboard, say, to be transported to New York, that is typically on a backhaul. They're coming in with product to bring into the New England region. They are looking for product to bring back to wherever they came from. So I think not many people are aware of that as well.
Great. So the trip wasn't just to get the cardboard, it's because they were already heading in our direction.
Correct.
And have to go back. That's excellent. Another theme that we've heard is that folks are really worried that once they leave their recycling in their curbside recyclable or in their curbside recycling container, if you're single stream, once they throw it in the hopper at the recycling center, you know, is it actually being recycled? And how do we go about assuring residents that, yes, we're not just tossing it all into the landfill or burning it, things are actually being recycled? And this question I'm going to ask to all three of you for your different perspectives. So Reagan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So, you know, as we've touched on quite a bit today, I like to remind people that recycling is a business. There's a real financial model, not just environmental model, to support recycling. And so what I like to tell people is so long as you are putting in your recyclables the items that your community says that it can accept, whether you're talking to your local transfer station staff or if you have curbside recycling, you're calling and talking to your solid waste department. you can feel quite confident that those items are being recycled. So it's really, we get more concerned with what I think Mark referred to as wish cycling, where you're hoping something is recyclable and you toss it in, but it turns out we don't actually have a ready market for it for your community.
Great. Bonnie, did you want to tackle that one too?
Yeah, when you think about, again, I'm going to keep referring to that load of cardboard just so we can kind of get a sense of what marketing material is about. But if you've got a tractor trailer load of cardboard that the vendor has sent from New York back and forth and then they pay for that material, they pay for the trucking to get there, they pay for the driver, they pay for the equipment. They really need that material. It's in high demand, and they're not going to buy material, cardboard that has other stuff in it, because they're not going to be able to use that contaminated material. So we work very, very closely with our vendors to make sure the spec is absolutely what they want, the material is what they want. We educate our operators to only put in that material, who in turn educate their residents to put that material in. But the vendor is paying for that. They're paying dearly, or if it's mixed paper, as a year ago, there was a cost to it, but they want that material. They're not just playing the game. They separate that material out of the single stream facilities as best as they can to get the best product, the best market for that, the best revenue to pass it back to the towns. So yeah, that's the majority of it's getting recycled.
Great. And what's your take on this, Mark? How do we assure people that things really are being recycled?
I think, to go back to, for operators, they need to get educated on where their material is going. Using an organization like the NRA is helpful because they can tell you where it's going. But when you're scheduling loads for shipment to go to market, I think it's important for your residents to be able to tell that story. That when a resident asks these questions, instead of saying, well, I think it's getting recycled, I hope, ask a couple of questions. Very often, recyclables are being moved through brokers or other cooperatives or, organizations like the NRA. And there's a couple of steps in the chain. And it might not always be as easy to find that answer, but it's an important answer to get. And as a facility manager or operator, it's worth your time finding out whether or not or where it's going, not whether or not it is, but not only answering the question, oh yes, it's being recycled, but to tell somebody this is where it's going is a critical answer to have for folks.
That's great. So we've had a lot of questions today, and I think that there's no doubt that recycling, while it's something that many of us want to do, it feels like discarding things has become really complicated. And Bonnie, I'm wondering if you can help answer why that is.
Mm, you mean as far as you've got items at home and you just don't know what to do with them, or particularly recyclables? I guess I was confused by that question. I think the complication comes in, we've got so many different products out there that we can purchase, and they're made out of different materials. And that's where we have a lot more power than we probably realize. That if we think first before we purchase, or we purchase something used from a consignment shop or from Restore or something like that, that maybe we just have to think a little bit different about what's going to happen to that product after I buy it. Case in the clamshells, what's going to happen to that? Is it more important for me to have it in that container, or do I have other choices? So really kind of thinking a little bit before we put the product in our hand, and then understanding what's going to happen to it as it goes down the stream.
No, I think that hits on it. Mark, did you have a more that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're seeing is, there's a number of laws that are coming out statewide. Extended producer responsibility is happening, which is changing the landscape of how different states are managing waste products. So I just lump everything in the title of waste products. It could be recyclables, or it could be just trash in general. I know Vermont has had a number of laws which we're not in Vermont, but we're next to it. So it has an effect on our community as far as creating confusion. I know Maine has done some things. So our neighboring states have different laws, which don't necessarily transfer over the border, but can create some confusion. So as these laws change, because landfills are closing, states are looking at how do we manage this stuff going forward. So these extended producer responsibility laws are coming into effect. Disposal bans on food scraps are coming down the road. And it's creating a very different landscape on how to manage things.
That's great. So we have just a few more minutes left, so I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. And we also, I know, had a lot of questions come in on the Q&A, and we're not going to be able to get to everything, but we're doing our best. So I'm going to skip ahead to this one's for Reagan. So what items do people typically think are recyclable, but they really are not?
Well, I think that gets back to, most things actually are recyclable. They can be recycled. The question is there a market to recycle them in your area? So again, I think people are often asking, can something be recycled? Can something not be recycled? Typically it can be, but the question is, can it be recycled in your community? Which again gets back to, recycling is just so local in terms of what your options are.
Yeah, and that can be a tough thing, depending on what's available to you. And I know that we certainly understand that frustration that you see in one town, one thing is recyclable, and perhaps in your town it's not. It's just the local nature of it. So Bonnie, I'm going to ask you the reverse of that question. So what are some items that people generally think are not recyclable, but really they are?
I guess I'm gonna have to go back to film. I mean, we all touch it every day. I mean, we have a bin in our office. There's 10 people in the office, and that fills up pretty quickly. So again, understanding that there are markets for this type of material, we just have to take it in hand and bring it to the grocery stores. Say um, that one jumps to the top.
Great. So we had some really specific questions come in as far as what percentage of recyclables actually get recycled in New Hampshire. It was broken down into cardboard and paper, aluminum and steel, plastics, as well as how many transfer stations we have in New Hampshire. We tried to do a little bit of this research ahead of time. We don't have all of the numbers, but I know that Bonnie has some information for us on that one.
So with the question of how much actually gets recycled, the majority of the material collected at the transfer stations to be recycled gets recycled. If you have a single stream program or a zero sort program, depends on the quality of that material going to be separated. What they call a contamination rate could be anywhere from 10 to 30% of what goes into the single stream product. Again, how well are the residents educated on putting it on curbside, bringing it to the transfer station? So the majority of that material that's being source separated or put into the single stream program is being recycled. Percentage wise, it's hard to break down the percentage depending on the program.
Great. So we found a few of those numbers, but it sounds like overwhelmingly, if it's tossed in to be recycled, generally speaking, it is being recycled, unless it's contaminated, which is a reason for us all to make sure that we are recycling well. I've seen a lot of questions today about if you have single stream recycling, so curbside recycling, where to find this information. Your best bet is to contact your town hall or city hall and ask them. They'll be able to direct you to the person who would be able to answer those questions for you. Oftentimes, you can also find that information on your town or city's website. Many towns and cities do a really good job because linking to contamination, they don't want things in the recycling, even if it's your curbside recycling that cannot be recycled. So that information is available. Sometimes you just have to look. And so it might be easier just to pick up the phone and call your town hall or city hall. Did you guys have anything to add to that one? Looks like I covered it. So we've made it through pretty much all of our pre-answered questions. I'm just taking a quick look. I've tried my best to answer some questions on the fly today that have come in through our Q&A. It looks like one question that I'm seeing a lot of is how we address the manufacturer side of recycling. So the folks who are actually creating the products. How do we as citizens have any ability to change how products are made or what they're being made with? And I didn't know if any of you three have, looks like Mark's ready to jump on in on that one. I'll let you go.
So here in Lebanon, what we've started a couple of months ago is something called an environmentally preferable purchasing policy, where one of the elements within the policy is to purchase recyclable products. So within your community, you can ensure that you're supporting recycling markets by making sure that your municipality is at the very least doing things like buying, copier or printer paper that has recycled content in it. That helps support the markets that your transfer station relies on. So, and doing the same thing with other products, that there are recycled content products out there, and that there are times when those products are slightly more expensive, but it's an investment with your community and a decision that people have to make. As individuals, we have to make the exact same decisions and develop our own environmentally preferable purchasing policies, where when we're shopping on Amazon or at our local grocery store, are we opting for recycled content toilet paper, or to a comment that Bonnie made earlier, the packaging that we're purchasing, are we purchasing packaging that's recyclable, or has less packaging? Either or. But as individuals, we need to start making these decisions and vote with our wallets and make sure that manufacturers understand that these do have value and we want these products.
That's great. Bonnie or Reagan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
One good example, if you look at say a Tide bottle, if that's your, detergent of choice, it will say 60% post-consumer plastic. That's our material. That's the material that we've sent to our recycling center to be sent to market. So again, kind of scrutinizing the things that you purchase and thinking about that would help a great deal as far as a consumer responsibility.
And then legislation can certainly play a role in terms of what we call extended producer responsibility, where some other states have passed laws that basically require manufacturers to ensure that their material can be recycled, or at least to have a process where there's a fee that's added on to ensure that that material will be properly managed, such as paint, for example. Vermont has paint care, which essentially adds on a small cost to the purchase of any new cans of paint, but then that makes sure that that paint can be responsibly managed after it's used.
That's great. Well, we've come right up to 1 o'clock. Boy, that flew really fast for me. I'm sure it did for you all. I want to thank you three again for being our panel of experts. I know that I learned some new things today. It was really interesting. I know we didn't get through all of our questions. I want to let folks know that if they're interested, we are doing a live Ask Me Anything event at our upcoming conference. The conference is May 16th and 17th. And if you go to nrrarecycles.org, you can find more information about the conference as well as how to register for it there. So thank you, everyone. We have recorded this. I will be sending a copy out for folks so they can go back and watch it at their leisure. But otherwise, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. To learn more and register for our recycling conference, please visit us online at www.nrrarecycles.org. recycling-conference. We hope to see you there.